He heard them outside, shooting, shouting. Then he heard them entering his house. He told my 3 grandchildren, cover yourselves with a blanket, hide under the blanket.
I saw them go down over there together, and also my mind is there. What is happening?
What's your name?
Adele Raymer.
Where are you from?
Originally from the Bronx, and since 1975 from Kibbutz Nirim, Israel.
And how did you end up Kibbutz Nirim in Israel from the Bronx?
So I was in a youth movement, Young Judea, as a teenager, and after I finished high school, I went on a gap year to Israel in 72, 73. And I went back to the States to go to college, like all good Jewish girls did. And then October 73, the Yom Kippur War broke out. And I said, well, what am I doing in the States? Israel needs me. And I made Aliyah December 1973 to a kibbutz in the south, Kibbutz Keturah, which had been founded by people from my youth movement. And
I stayed there, actually. When I came during the summer, I spent a week there.
And I was immediately drafted into the army. And as part of my army service, I came to Kibbutz Nirim and fell in love with it and stayed here.
Why did your army service bring you here? What unit were you in? What was the...
I was in Nachal.
Okay.
And so most of my service was on a kibbutz. And I was not happy at Keturah. And I wanted to go someplace else, but I couldn't go any place unless the army would approve of it. So this was one of the places that the army gave the okay to go to because it was small kibbutz on the border. So they said you can finish your service there.
On the border of where?
On the border with the Gaza Strip.
And at the time, who was controlling the Gaza Strip?
At the time, it was at 1975. Israel was controlling the Gaza Strip. It had been given back in the peace accords. Israel wanted to give it to Egypt. Egypt didn't want it. So it stayed under Israeli control.
And you said you went to college like all nice Jewish girls do. And what were you studying?
The plan was to study theater studies in NYU.
And when the war broke out and you felt that you needed to come here, obviously there was a Zionistic pull that you had. So you grew up in, I assume, a traditional Jewish home, a Zionistic home. Can you tell me a little bit about why you were so pulled and drawn?
I was brought up in a Jewish home. Not like Israel was just part of everyday life, talk about Israel and the worry about Israel, but mostly one of my uncles, Dov Bernie Troy, Zichrono Livracha, just passed away. That's where I got my Zionism from. He was a history teacher. He ran weapons he was during during the War of Independence for Israel. He was too young, I think, to come over, or his family didn't want him to come over. So he did what he could from the States, and that was raising money and getting weapons to send over to Israel. And he's always been the Zionist, the source of my Zionism. And I used to spend summers with him. He and his wife were teachers. So they used to go away summers to a bungalow colony. And I was an only child. But I loved being with them because I had 3 kids that I felt like they were
your siblings.
My adopted siblings, my surrogate siblings. And I used to, even though they were a lot younger than me, but I used to love spending time with them. So I'd go away with them for the summers. And at one point, my aunt and my uncle and my parents decided I was 15 years old. I needed to be with peers. So that's how I got to Young Judea, which was Tel Yehuda, which was the Young Judean camp. And I started going summers to Tel Yehuda, and
Which is where?
sorry,
Which is where?
it's in Barryville, New York,
Okay.
and learning about Israel and learning Hebrew, and it just deepened my Zionist roots.
Wow, it's beautiful.
And then went on your course after high school.
And when you made Aliyah and you came here, and during that time that you were saying that, Israel needs me, what am I doing in America? Did you have friends that came with you, or did you pick up alone and this is what I'm
I was a
doing for
lone
me?
soldier before there was such
Lone
a
soldier.
thing as lone soldiers.
Interesting.
But I was lucky. I was on a kibbutz, so it's like, it's not like a lone soldier that's someplace in the city and totally on their own. So I had a lot of support from the kibbutz because they were all young. They were like just a couple of years older than me. They'd all gone through the army. They were a Garin Nachal that founded the kibbutz.
And your army service ended when?
My army service ended in 76.
And did you stay on as a reservist? What happened?
So
after your
I stayed on because I fell in love with the kibbutz.
Okay.
I stayed on to become a kibbutz member.
And after your army time, what did you get involved in? Like tell me a little bit about your life from 76 until, let's say, 2023. So it's a big gap, but
They were
so your life
a different.
after the 76.
So there were different. After I finished the army, I wanted to go study. There were a number of different things I was considering: arts and crafts, theater, or English teaching. And I realized that they're always going to need English teachers. Like Kibbutz Nirim is in the middle of nowhere, and in 1976 it was even more in the middle of nowhere because public transportation was a lot worse than it was today. People didn't have cars. People didn't have personal cars. The kibbutz had a fleet of cars, but I didn't even drive. So we were really in the middle of nowhere. And I'm thinking, if I go into theater, I'm not near any theaters here. If I go to be a theater teacher, that's not a full-time job. Same thing with arts and crafts. But English, they're always going to need English teachers. And so that's what I went to study.
And you became an English teacher, and you stayed out here?
And I stayed out here teaching for 38 years in our regional school, in our regional high school.
Can you tell me a little bit about the kibbutz? From the time you got here, how many people were here when you got here? Today, 2023, what is the kibbutz, or 2024, excuse me, and leading up to October 7th, before, October 7th, what did the kibbutz look like and how did it evolve?
So we were under 200 members when I came to live here. So members are just, the adults who have been accepted into membership. It's not counting the kids. I don't know what the population of Nirim was in 1975. Today, as I said, we're 430 people who live on the kibbutz, and I believe somewhere about 240 members. We're basically an agricultural kibbutz. We're one of the few kibbutzim, if not one of the only kibbutzim, that does not have a factory and never really did. We base our income on agriculture.
Anything specific?
We have avocado, bananas, wheat, lots and lots and lots of wheat, huge wheat fields.
Interesting.
Potatoes, sweet potatoes, peanuts, cotton. Like, the basis is wheat and avocado. We also have a milking dairy. But they play around with all different things to see what grows best. We tried organic cotton last year, which was a total disaster.
And how does the kibbutz come up with, trying new things and testing? Like, there's a committee that's involved in all this. Do you play an active role in that?
The people who do that for a living, I'm an English teacher.
Okay.
I don't do that. But we have professional farmers, and they do surveys. They've studied. They know what they're doing, and they see what's needed in the international on the international front, where they're going to be able to export what we need in Israel. So,
and the kibbutz exports a lot of their, produce and stuff to. Where do they export to?
outside of Israel.
Okay. Okay, fair enough. Fair enough.
I do not know.
You're in the
I'm an
teaching.
English teacher.
Yeah, you're in the English teaching department. Can you tell me a little bit about your relationship being like geographically situated so close to the border of Gaza? What was the relationship pre-October 7th with the kibbutz and our neighbors across the border?
Kibbutz Nirim is 2 kilometers away from the border with the Gaza Strip. And in 1950, a member of this kibbutz wrote a song which has become our anthem. And the song says, "You'll see, someday we're going to have peace on this border, and we're going to take our guard tower and bring it over to the Mediterranean beach, and it'll be a lifeguard tower, and we'll sit around a campfire and talk to Ahmed and Muhammad and make jokes about the price of milk and whatever. And we'll go to Khan Yunis and we'll watch movies in spoken Arabic." And that's my kibbutz's anthem. That's what we have been pining for since the very beginning, for coexistence, for collaboration. When you were walking down, when we met outside, a guy was riding by on his bike. Okay, that's Arnon. He lost a brother to this conflict. His brother was killed after fighting in the 6-Day War. He was out in the avocados, driving on a tractor, and it came up upon a landmine, and he was killed. Arnon has always been somebody who has believed in coexistence and believed in peace and believed that we can be good neighbors. And Arnon used to volunteer in a program called the Road to Recovery, where have you heard of that?
Yeah, but remind me what.
So Israelis volunteer their time. They get into their cars, drive over to the Erez crossing on the Gaza Strip, or the borders along Judea and Samaria, and they take Gazans who need to be taken care of in hospitals and don't have how to get there. So they take them to a hospital in Israel so that they can be healed. And Arnon, after all he'd lived through, and the brother that he lost, would do that. I accompanied him once, and it was amazing. It was an amazing thing to see these people, a couple, the father, the man was suffering from cancer, and he was being brought to a hospital in Israel to be cured.
What were those car rides like? Because stereotypically, and from what the mainstream media would lead us to believe, is that one would never happen, and two, if that was to happen, it would probably be a very hostile engagement. What were those car rides like?
So I only accompanied him once, and unfortunately, it was with a couple that I couldn't really communicate with, because they didn't speak any English or Hebrew, and I didn't speak any Arabic. But we interacted a little, and they were very grateful and happy that this opportunity was being given to them, that they were able to receive treatment in Israel, and it was able to give them hope. And my hope is that the people that come over, I'm also a trained medical clown, and not once did I come across children from Gaza in our hospitals and clowning for them, and laughter is an international language. Everybody understands laughter. You don't need language for laughter.
Do you feel that these people that would come across and would be a part of this program, the Gazans who would come across, do you feel that they shared that same, like we say in Hebrew, tikva, that same hope of coexistence?
Some of them did. And if they didn't, I guess they wouldn't have said.
Yeah.
But I've had connections with Gazans. I did educational activities with people from Gaza. There's a man named Rami Aman who is not in Gaza, hasn't been there for a few years. He's in Egypt now, I believe. But he founded the Gaza Youth Committee. And I did a few activities with them For example, in 2019, there was a bike marathon where kids on their side of the border and young people on our side of the border rode the bicycles on the same day, wearing the same shirts that said freedom, peace.
On either side of the border.
Yeah.
That's
so
beautiful.
They were farther from the border because it would have been dangerous for them. We were in the area of Be'eri. There's like Be'eri forest. And in the middle of the bike ride, we had a Skype call with the organizers. They were riding later on that same day, so they weren't out on their bikes at that time. They were in the office and talking to us, and everybody was so excited. And I've done Skype calls with Rami and people on both sides of the border. Days after bombs were exploding over there and over here, and talking to people and expressing empathy on both sides. Until October 7th, I have taken people around Nirim for years. And until October 7th, I would always end our tour up at the Western fence and telling people that I am sure that the vast majority of the people on the other side of that fence just want the same thing that I do, to safety for their children, to put food on their table. As of October 7th, I'm not so sure I got my numbers right.
And so take me through your October 7th, right? October 6th here in Israel was Simchat Torah, very happy time. I know for myself, I spent the Shabbat at a Shabbat engagement party. Unprecedented things happen, and I want to say our lives have completely changed since October 7th, and as we heard during COVID, new normal, if you will. What was your experience on October 7th?
So my October 7th began with October 6th because we were celebrating our 77th anniversary of my kibbutz. My kibbutz is one of the 11 nekudot, one of the 11 points that in 1946, David Ben-Gurion wanted there to be a Jewish presence in the Negev desert. He sent out 10 communities of young people all throughout the Negev to put up 4 walls and a roof, which at the time, according to Ottoman law, which was respected then, 4 walls and a roof is a structure that cannot be taken down. So overnight, they went, put up a structure, and my kibbutz was one of those kibbutzim that did that. So that was Motzei Yom Kippur. For the past 20 years, I want to say, we moved the date to Simchat Torah, because Yom Kippur, there are people here who fast. So October 6th, we were celebrating our 77th anniversary, and my daughter was in charge of the cultural activities.
Who, for the record, was living on Kibbutz Nirim with her kids?
Was living on Kibbutz Nirim. She and her ex-husband and her 3 children, my 3 grandchildren. I have 3 grandchildren. I have 8 grandchildren, but 3 of them, Ziv, Raz, and Yuval, age 2, 6, and 8, were on Nirim that day. And it was a wonderful celebration, and my youngest son also came to visit for the weekend. He was just about to go on a long trip, so he wanted to come be with me for the weekend, to be for the festivities. His birthday is October 8th.
Wow.
Somebody owes him a birthday party. So before I went to sleep, I told my son, I'm an amateur photographer.
Okay.
And I'd seen a picture that a friend of mine took of a field of wild squills at sunrise in one of the fields nearby. So I told my son before I went to sleep, if you don't see me in the morning, don't worry. I'm going out with my camera in the car, and I want to find this field. I know more or less where it is, and take pictures at sunrise. Luckily, I was too tired that morning to get up at 5:45 in the morning, because at 6:30 we started getting massive incoming rockets, massive barrages, and So I was sleeping in my bedroom, and my son was sleeping in my guest room, which is also my safe room, which is the room right behind you. And so I ran into the safe room, and the barrage was so heavy that I was scared to stand up and close the iron sleeve on the door, on the window. Safe rooms are built with reinforced concrete walls and ceiling. They have a special thick glass and a special iron sleeve that you pull closed, and a door that you pull closed and click the handle, and there are prongs that go into the framework so that if the house is hit by a rocket elsewhere, it won't implode and blow the door open. So I ran into the safe room, closed the door, clicked the handle, but sat on the floor underneath the window, waiting for the barrages to end. And at one point, there was a lull, so I closed the sleeve, and then we started getting messages saying that Israel had been invaded, that we should go outside our safe room, lock all the doors and windows, then go back into the safe room and lock the door. The problem with that is that safe room doors do not lock. They were built to keep us safe from rockets. Nobody considered the option of infiltration, because if something happens to you, a medical emergency in the safe room, emergency people are not going to be able to get you out if the door is locked. That was what they said then. I mean, the Hamas managed. So I'm thinking
somebody would be able to get in.
Somebody would be able to get in. Hindsight is 2020, right? So, and people in Nirim even, not everybody knew that the safe room door doesn't lock. So we have an internal messaging system. I'm writing in the internal messaging
It's like on a WhatsApp.
program. It's not WhatsApp, it's internal. It's just for our kibbutz, special internal system for our kibbutz. And I'm writing there, but that safe room doesn't lock. And all these people are saying, oh, no, it does. You just pull the handle and click it. And I'm saying, no, that doesn't lock it. You can still open it from the outside. People here were not aware that the safe room door doesn't lock. Crazy. And I'm following what's going on the messaging system, and I'm seeing people saying, we hear shooting outside. And then I see them saying, we hear Arabic outside our windows. And I'm 430 people. I know everybody, and I know where everybody lives. And I'm watching the progression of these cries for help as they're getting closer and closer to where my son-in-law and 3 grandchildren are, closer and closer to where my daughter is, closer and closer to where I am with my son.
At this time, you're in the safe room.
We're in the safe room all this time.
Did you go out and lock your doors?
I did.
You did?
I locked my doors. I have a Facebook group called Life on the Border with Gaza.
Okay.
And whenever stuff happens, I go on and do Facebook Live. So you could go back to October 7th and see me in the morning walking around my house doing a Facebook Live saying, I was told to lock all the doors and windows. I don't really think this is going to be necessary because we're 2 kilometers away, and there's the fence, and there's soldiers, and there's the fence around the kibbutz, but I'll humor them.
Hindsight's 2020.
At one point, we started hearing shooting outside our house, and we started hearing Arabic. So a little after 6:15 on October 7th, Asaf Hamami, who was the commander of the Southern Brigade and at a base 7 minutes drive away from here, realized that something very unusual was coming down. And his 6-year-old son was visiting him for the Chag. So he handed his son over to one of the other soldiers, took 2 soldiers with him, got in his car, and drove out into the fields to see what was going on. As he passed by Nirim, he realized that terrorists were already in Nirim. So he drove around to the front gate, came in through the front gate, drove in here, and here at around 6:30 in the morning is where the first boots on the ground were that day. We knew nothing about it for months. So he was here. He was wounded. They were the first to engage the terrorists here. He was wounded. I'm not sure if exactly here or farther down there, but they brought him over to the bomb shelter here, which was open. And his soldiers put a tourniquet on him and put the time on so they know what time it happened. And they killed a number of the Nukhba leaders, the armed terrorist leaders, but then they were killed. They realized what a high-ranking officer they had here. So after decapitating him, they took his body and the bodies of the two soldiers with him back into the Gaza Strip, and the terrorists that took him back were like among the leaders. So that was one of the little miracles I was telling you about, because the terrorists that were left here, the Nukhba terrorists that were left here, were left without a leader. So they didn't really have the game plan. So they went around and they burnt and they destroyed. As we're walking around, every place you see a black spot on the ground, that was where cars were incinerated. So they just came and destroyed and did everything they could to ruin what they could, to kill who they could. But they didn't really have, apparently, the game plan. There was a map with people's names. So I don't know what the game plan was, but remember I told you that Nirim was supposed to be like Niroz. Niroz lost 1 out of every 4. So this is one of the reasons that what happened there didn't happen here. That was one of them. Another one is that farther down this road, we can't see it from here, is the back gate. There's a yellow gate in the back, like the yellow gate that you came in through the front. And the terrorists wanted to come through that yellow gate, but a mortar had exploded next to it and jammed the motor. So they weren't able to open the gate and drive through. On Nir Oz, they opened the gate, and it was the terrorists stole cars and tractors, and that's how they were able to get so many hostages out, live and dead.
What were you feeling? What were you feeling inside? Did adrenaline take over and flight or fight kicked in? Or was it, were you in panic? Like what were you feeling?
I was freaking out. And sure that this has got to be a mistake. This can't be real. It was just so inconceivable. And on the one hand, panicking. There's no place to flee to. You're trapped. You know, when I was a kid growing up in the States, I used to watch Hogan's Heroes.
Okay, sure.
And I used to play, where would I hide in my house if the Nazis came? I never dreamed that I would be in my house, in my country, in my kibbutz, hiding from the Nazis of 2023. But that's what we were doing. We're sitting in the safe room, hiding. We turned off the AC. It was hot. It was hotter than it is today. We turned off the AC so that there would be no sound of a motor. We turned off the TV. That was too much information for me. I had to be focused on what was going on in my own community. I couldn't try and even think about what was going on elsewhere. But I was sure it was the end of Israel. I was sure we were being conquered today, that was going to be from the north and the east and the west and from all over. I was sure this is it.
You said that on one hand you couldn't believe that this was actually happening. You went on this Facebook Live. You said you know let's humor them. I'll close all the doors. At what moment? Because I assume you were inside the whole time. At what moment did you have that switch in your head that you were like, wow, this is real, this is happening?
When I saw that people were saying that they hear Arabic outside their houses. And then we heard Arabic. And I looked at my son and he looked at me and told each other that we loved each other. And basically said goodbye. We were just waiting for the terrorists to burst in any moment and come and kill us.
And what?
So my son was sitting in front of the safe room door
Yeah.
and holding down the handle. And I was sitting on the bed and trying to follow what's going on here. And my son understands a little bit Arabic. And he heard somebody saying in Arabic, "Come here." And we didn't know what that meant, and we just waited.
They were inside your house at this point, or this is
We
outside
didn't know
your house?
where they were,
Okay.
but we could hear Arabic, and he heard them saying, "Come here." About an hour later, after things sort of got quieter, I was in physical pain. I hadn't gone to the bathroom. There's no bathroom in the safe room. Men can use a bottle. Women are not built that way, and I was not going to do that in front of my son. So I endangered us. I quietly opened the safe room door to go out to the bathroom, and I saw opposite the safe room door, I saw the window. Slats broken. The mosquito net was, somebody started breaking through it, cutting through it. That's what we heard. Terrorists were on my front porch. They tried to open the door, it was locked. So they started breaking in through the window, and somebody called them away. So dumb luck or divine intervention, or my late husband watching over us, whatever. They went elsewhere, and we'll never know why. It was so random. The houses that they went into, there were houses that they went into and slaughtered people. There were houses that we went into and set the houses afire. And there were houses they just, like mine.
Passed over.
They passed over. They started and passed over.
And you said your daughter and your son-in-law and the grandkids, you mentioned them earlier, and in a chat you were following, in the internal messaging system, you were following that they were getting closer. What happened to them? What was their experience and story?
My son-in-law was one of the first responders. So he was armed, but he couldn't go out to be with the first responders because he had my 3 young grandchildren in the house with him. He heard them outside, shooting, shouting. Then he heard them entering his house. He told my 3 grandchildren, cover yourselves with a blanket, hide under the blanket. You're going to hear a loud noise. Don't come out no matter what happens. Age 2, 6, and 8, Ziv, Raz, and Yuval. They never listen. They listened. He waited until he saw the handle of the safe room door moving, kicked it open, and shot the terrorist right in front of the safe room. He started going after another 2 that were running away, but then saw through the door that there were terrorists outside that were highly armed, that he didn't stand a chance against them, and if anything happened to him, there was nobody to protect the girls, so he cut his losses, went back into the safe room, got down on one knee, lifted his gun, and waited. Didn't hold the door, aimed his gun at the door and said, the next person that comes through that door is getting a bullet. My daughter at the same time was in her house, which is not far away. It's 2 rows down, but a world away. She did not know what was happening to her children. He was kind of busy. He couldn't really communicate with her. My daughter, if you had told me that one of our 4 kids would come back and live on Nirim, I would have said, yeah, but not Lilach. Because since age 9, she has been scared of infiltration. Her grandfather, who also lives here, she's 3rd generation Nirim. No, 2nd, her children are 3rd. When she was about 9 years old, there was high alert, and her grandfather was walking around with a gun. And ever since then, she has feared infiltration. She wanted to live any place but Nirim. The man she married was also born here, and he wanted to live no place but Nirim. So they settled down here and built a family, which fell apart, unfortunately, just about a year ago now. She has been post-traumatic since the first escalations that we've had here.
Which is when?
They started in 2008-9, but she wasn't living here at the time.
Okay.
So 2014, she was living here.
Suke
Yeah.
I happened to be I guess on bad luck. I had come for the summer, and
You gotta stop coming here, or just live here.
or live
That's
here. I
it.
think that's the better answer.
So she was on her own in her house without electricity. She turned off all the lights, of course turned off the AC, under her bed, hiding in the dark under her bed for hours. She did not dare go to the bathroom. So I won't get any more graphic than that. The first boots on the ground that came to Nirim was at 1:30 in the afternoon.
On October 7th.
7 hours after this nightmare began. They came because they heard of a family in a burning house with a 10-day-old baby in the safe room. And smoke was billowing into the safe room because the terrorists tried to open the door, but their mom and dad, Uriel and Amy, fought them on the handle and managed to prevent them from opening the door, but the door was dislodged from the frame enough so that when the smoke started, it started billowing into the safe room with a 10-day-old baby. And they were calling for help anywhere they could. Fire department, the IDF, everybody was writing on the WhatsApp group, on the internal messaging group, where's the army? Where are the people that are supposed to be coming to save us? The only message that we got from the head of security here, it's going to take a while. Each family is on their own. 7 hours.
What was it like receiving that message?
I was sure I was not going to see another sunrise. I was sure that was it. We would all be slaughtered. And then Uriel fought for the handle. It was dislodged to a certain extent, so when the house was set on fire, you could see the smoke came through there, streaming in here. And Kai was put here on the windowsill so he could get a little bit fresh air when there were no terrorists outside. When there were terrorists outside, they put him low down because smoke rises. But a bullet went through this. It did not penetrate the window. The window was apparently closed, and the glass stopped it. They didn't put the baby there when they were hearing, here, I've got a picture of Kai. Yes. That's Kai on the windowsill.
Jeez.
And that's what their living room looked like after the fire. These were the soldiers that rescued me. And 5:15. Wow. Oh my God. And he's the one, I interviewed him when we were when we got to Beersheba afterwards, and he said that they heard that there was a house on fire with a 10-month-old baby, so they came here.
How many people on October 7th here at Kibbutz Nirim lost their lives?
5. Only 5. When you compare it to other communities in Nir Oz, which lost 1 out of every 4, the terrorists that planned Nir Oz also planned Nirim. So we had a number of tragedies here, but we also had a number of little miracles. One of the miracles was baby Kai, because the soldiers that came to rescue us at 1:30 were supposed to go to another kibbutz. But when they heard that there was a baby in a burning house, a 10-day-old baby, they said, we got to go to Nirim. So that 10-day-old baby saved a lot of lives here. They went first to Kai's house, extricated Kai and his parents, Amy and Uriel, and Amy's mom, Deborah. And then they went house to house in the area where all of these houses were burning, killing terrorists, extricating people, taking them to relatively safer areas. They went to my son-in-law's house. They got him and my grandchildren out through the window so that the girls wouldn't have to see a dead body in their house. Also, my son-in-law said that after he shot him, he saw that there was smoke coming out of his pockets, so he was scared that he had grenades. So he didn't want anybody going past him there.
What was your extraction experience like?
So until they got to here,
Yeah.
it wasn't until 5:15. So we were here in that room waiting for terrorists to burst in any minute for 11 hours. And we got all sorts of warnings saying the terrorists are dressed up as soldiers. So look at their shoes. I wasn't going to open the window. We were also told that after the army had arrived, that the army was going around house to house. It was going to take a while not to open the door unless we're sure it's the IDF. How do you know that? So one of the guys I interviewed, when we evacuated, I took a very poorly packed little suitcase, but I took my camera and I took my laptop, and from the very first week in Eilat, started interviewing people, getting their October 7th stories. And one of the people who lives 2 rows down from me, he's about 28. When they came to rescue him, it took 5 minutes for them to convince him to open the door. He was asking who their commander is and who's the commander of this unit and how many soldiers are in that. Like, he was grilling them to make sure that they were the IDF. He didn't trust them.
So.
I was more trusting. They called out Adele, and I bungee jumped. I, took a leap of faith and opened the door, and it was the IDF. And they walked us under fire. We were still hearing gunfire. There were still terrorists running around. There were still incoming rockets while we were walking to the safe area that they were taking us.
What did you see on that walk?
A lot of shot up cars and a lot of smoke coming from the corner of the kibbutz. Some people that were with me saw bodies. I did not notice that. But they took us around the long way, and I couldn't understand why. And when we got to the community center, after having an incoming rocket alert, we had to throw ourselves down on the ground and cover our heads till we heard the explosion, and then we continued. I asked the soldier that took us there, why didn't you take us around the short way? He said, because we didn't want to expose you to the bodies that were there. This is where the battle with Hamami and Tomer Achimas and Kirill Burdetsky. So they wrote on the wall here, Kan nilchamu ba'oz Giborei Yisrael. Here fought bravely the heroes of Israel, Aluf Mishneh Asaf Hamami, Tomer Achimas, Kirill Burdetsky, Miginei Nirim, protectors of Nirim. And that's a picture of Asaf Hamami. That's Tomer, and that's Kirill.